Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time to join us today. I'm joined by Matthew Fisch here from FortMesa. Hi, Matt.
Hi, guys.
Before we jump into just some quick intros and everything, a couple housekeeping items. What we're doing is a series of sessions, just interview style, fireside chat style, just helping out people from the channel, just all types of information. So look out for those. If you do have any questions or comments today, or really just anything, please don't hesitate to throw it into the chat right there, and we will see that and potentially bring it up on the feed and talk about it. We are scheduled for about 30 minutes today, but we may go over something like that, just depending on our discussion. Quick thing about us, myself, Mark Howells, Chief Strategist at Dakota Ridge Marketing. We are technology marketers covering kind of multi-channel, multiple different channels for all different technology companies. And Matt, would love to put you on the spot and hear more about you and FortMesa.
Well, let me first say that I'm super excited to be talking with a marketing firm that gets MSP. That's sort of special. A lot of our partners, they don't work with specialist marketing firms, and I think that vertical specialization it really matters. So we're a software firm. FortMesa makes software specifically for technology service providers that helps our partners build great cybersecurity businesses, mostly through enablement. We help our clients inform their clients on what cybersecurity they have in place, where they should be getting to, and then we help after a successful cybersecurity sale, project manage through what could be hundreds of different remediation tasks that need to be performed, and then of course at the end prove it. Now, along with the software enablement, we do have some professional services. We do work with marketing agencies to put together really tight value props on cyber service delivery. We also do some professional services on the assessment side. So it's common in cybersecurity to sometimes require external assessment, a third-party assessment looking over the shoulders of the remediator or the implementer, and we support our partners in that way as well.
Wonderful. Thank you. Well, I appreciate your time and you joining us today. I'm excited about this, yes, because we're on the marketing side, as you said, for MSPs and for other technology companies. But we've talked a couple times now, and I think we're pretty in alignment on our views, hopefully, on cybersecurity messaging, the marketing needs, all of this. And this has come up so many times over the years from MSSPs, from MSPs, just kind of how do we do this? How do we shift that perception and get over those objections to get the buy-in? I've actually heard it, cybersecurity sales, if you will, and messaging equated to insurance sales, just because it's kind of that similar. And I don't know if you've heard that or not. But also heart health is the other thing of like, this terrible thing could happen. And so make sure you're good now. And so how do we work with that?
First of all, let me say, there are insurers out there that have different routes to market, right? And some of them sell on fear, and some of them sell on hope, yep. Right? I think hope works better, right? I think talking about health, talking about how to be well, right? How to be safe. I think that's what works in the market right now. People are a little more informed than they were 10 years ago when you could fear them into a sale. But yeah, in general, cybersecurity is the thing that makes you safer, right? So that's the way you should sell it.
Yeah. No, I like that. That's also one of the things that, I hope we dive into more today, is just that positive versus negative setup, if you will. I've seen a lot of cyber companies just go negative, right? This is going to happen. These are all the breaches that have happened. Like, you got to be scared about this. But before we get into too much, I want to start with kind of a first question, just lay the groundwork here. What do you see out there as far as the common objections to just investing in cybersecurity?
Let me. There's two layers to this. First of all, the first layer is what type of conversation are you having with your client? Because with a lot of conversations, if you're selling based on technology, if you're selling based on feature, if you're selling based on like cyber capability, oftentimes the response you're going to get from your client's business owner, your client's contact is it's too expensive, right? We don't have money for that. We don't budget for that. How about just this small piece instead? But I think that's really a stand-in response from clients for many different things that are going on in their head. So while I would say that the biggest objection is frequently it's too expensive. We don't have money for that. I think that really what people are actually thinking and their the objections in their actual brain are it's a diverse categories of I don't know how to make this decision. I'm not equipped to make this decision right now. I think that the objection truly is the end clients aren't sufficiently informed to be able to invest, right? And that's really what they're doing. They're investing in their safety.
Yeah, no, that makes 100% sense. I think cost is a big thing up front that they're talking about. Do you see kind of a perception of low risk? And I'm asking that just because that's what we've seen a lot of is a misunderstanding, if you will, of the risk there. And I know we're going to kind of the negative side of the messaging, but when you look at the data, it's just kind of crazy. All these small businesses that are getting hit and breached and everything in some way, shape, or form. And there's that usual like, I'm too small, or like, nah, this won't happen to me, like all of that kind of stuff.
Well, I mean, there's businesses operate in different ways. Like some of them are super strategic in their thinking, and others are more tactical, worried about the day-to-day operational. But I think when you look at individuals, there's this psychology around risk, right? The reason that we have risk formulas and risk assessments and actuarial science and stuff like that is because humans aren't particularly good at judging risks if they can't see them right now, right? And this is because we're all animals running around. And if we stayed scared all the time, we would never leave our caves, right?
Yeah.
A lot of times people know that their neighbors are getting hit. They know that every single day they look at the newspaper, there's a cyber angle. They know that. Everyone knows that, unless you've been hiding under a rock for 15 years. People know that. But there is a little bit of this lightning strike mentality. That's just what happens in the world now. Sometimes when we walk out on the street, we get wet. There's nothing I can do about it. It's just going to rain sometimes. I'm just going to get struck by lightning sometimes. And this is because people look at the news and they say, well, that giant corporation, right, that's worth 10 or $100 billion, right? They got hit. They couldn't protect themselves. They got like fleeced. How could I possibly protect myself, right? And it's actually a reasonable response from someone that's being informed by front page news, right? Because no one's laid out, well, actually, there's this risk equation, and you can actually take a percentage of your risk off the table for not that much, right? Or that the risk is this big, but like by doing this small thing, you can eliminate this. And you're not 100% safe, but maybe you're 80% safer, maybe you're 90% safer. And that is something that a business owner, they'll respond to that, if you frame things like that.
Yep. No, I like that thought, and we're going to get into more of this with some of the other questions. But what I was just thinking about was kind of the guiding of the buyer journey, if you will. The buyer journey now, if you've ever mapped it, it used to be kind of pretty straightforward, and now it's bing, bong, bong all over the place. And marketing to be all those different places is, there's something to be said for that. But what I was thinking about was guiding the people through that process, because to your point, if there's not the education there, the awareness of what's going on. And if you're providing that awareness, but as soon as you're connected with them, nurturing them through that kind of step-by-step process of what does this mean for your business? Well, what about the ROI of things? How can we calculate this to work on that risk equation? and show you, yeah, with this small investment, then, we can take this much risk off the table.
Yeah, I mean, I think the buyer journey is super important if you want to build a scalable cyber business. If you're selling from people that are responding to a sales pitch, right, and you're not bringing them through the full journey, okay, you're relying on the fact that either they're fully informed already, or they're scared and they're like a deer in headlights running a random direction, and sometimes they're going to run through your sales funnel and result in a sale, right? And that's like, random is not the best way to win in growing a business, right?
Right.
And the reality is anyone can make the right decision in cyber buying. Anyone can right size their cyber investments and be informed about it, right? But your job as a business is really to go to market, be a marketer, right? And in cyber, what that means is you need to take laymen, right? And you need to give them enough information to make informed decisions, right? They need to be able to look and actually understand what you're selling them, right?
Yeah.
And that, honestly, that's like us cyber professionals, we take 10 or 20 years to learn how to do this stuff, right? And you're not going to expect your client to go through 20 years of learning to buy a cyber solution, but people are not equipped to make the right investments unless you teach them, right? So they have their buyer journey, right? And you have to be their mentor and bring them through it. And there's so many things that you need to do to prepare them before they're really ready to make an informed buy, right? And that's the goal.
Yeah. Yep. And we kind of just preempted this question, but I really wanted to get to not only awareness campaigns, but kind of education side of things, of just how that ties into the buyer journey. How I'll form it slightly differently, just because we just talked about it, but how much education is right? And what I mean by that is, how much do you want to pull back the curtain and say, this is everything we're doing, and these are all the technical aspects and all this, or is it just guide them, give them what they need, enough of what they need to be smart enough to make that investment decision?
Yeah, I think I mean, this depends on the circumstance, but let's talk about an average small business. And I know there's no such thing as really average, right? But if you look at like numbers, employee counts, right, in small businesses, there's this huge like lump around 25 employees. So let's talk about a 25 employee business, right? And let's say that they're an insurance agency, right? What do they know about cyber, right? And forget the fact that they might sell cyber insurance, because a lot of these insurance agencies do sell cyber insurance policies, but literally the only thing they know about that cyber insurance policy is what's on that one-page application, right? They're not actually making the underwriting decisions. They don't know why this or that's bad, right? But they do need to worry about cyber. So they're in financial services, and they get the financial services rags, right? And there's cyber on the cover of every single one of those, talking about risk assessments and stuff. So they understand risk assessments. They understand all these regulations that are required in their industry. But you know what they don't know is, they don't know, okay, I'm getting this industry rag, which is going out to banks, and it's going to insurers, and it's going to money processors, right? They don't know, like, okay, well, what's the version of cyber that I need to be worried about in my state, in my home city, at this size? What's reasonable for me, right? So they don't need like this big industry-wide. They need education. They need to just know, like, what is Joe down the street that runs a shop that's a little bit bigger than mine, and he's doing great, right? And I want to be like him in 5 years, right? What is he doing, right? How do I relate to him? So I think that your buyers, when they're coming through their research phase, right, they need to understand, well, where is their security right now? How does that relate to other people, right? That's credible to them, right? And I think that that's a very small amount of the education space, right? Here's where you're at. Here's where you should be. Here's where, an industry regulator says maybe you could be. That's sort of the level of information. And I think that talking about products, talking about technical actions, I don't think that that's the level of information that's useful to an average small business. And so from an education perspective, yeah, there's some stuff you got to hit there, right? And if they don't know what a risk assessment is, you might need to explain what that is. If they don't know what multi-factor authentication is, you might need to explain them why that's important, right?
Mm-hmm.
But they don't need the whole picture, right? They need just enough to understand how are their needs different than other needs, and how do their needs relate to your offering, right? If you're saying, well, we have the right solution to you, you need to explain it in terms of, well, Joe down the street does this similar thing.
Yeah.
And that's if you want to be like him, you need this and this and this.
Yeah.
So I don't know if that answers the question, but that's the way I look at it. And the level of education is basically like, people want to know that they're doing the right thing, right?
Right.
Like basically everyone wants to be a good guy, right? But
Yep.
you have to explain to them what that is.
Yeah. No, I think that speaks to a few definite points that we work with, clients on, for example, is just bring the technical element down a few notches. Number one, because usually, you guys watching are technical in nature and coming from that standpoint. So that makes sense. But the people you're talking to, it's all about the reader, as I say, or the person you're prospecting to. It's so important to just speak in their language. And then also it sounds like you're kind of talking social proof and personalization, just to use two different marketing terms, aligning that not only with the marketing, but also the education elements of what you're doing to say, hey, this is for you. We're talking specifically to your use case, what you need from an education standpoint. And then these are the people that, have also have gotten to, as you said, where you want to go. This is what they're doing. So definitely love that. I did want to bring up one stat here that I have, which is just about ROI and showcasing all of this, that 86% of decision makers see cybersecurity as a contributor to business value. That to me is a pretty interesting stat when we're talking about this kind of positive versus negative and what are we showcasing from a messaging standpoint. That's huge. That's huge majority contributor to business value. So we gotta put that hat on.
If we rewind like 15 years, we were having the same conversation, maybe 20 years, right? Same conversation about technology in general, right? The idea that your investments in technology, the effectiveness of your technology would actually have an impact in your business value was really questionable 20 years ago. Like people didn't believe that it was any different than like what like brand of pen they had in their office supply cabinet, right? Like there was a lot of business owners that literally didn't believe in there being business value in investments in IT, right? And it seems ridiculous now, right? To think that, well, a business that has, a digitization strategy or that has automated processes or that has a data warehouse, right? That doesn't clearly create business value, right? I think it's obvious to everyone. And I think that this question right now, that percentage, 86%, yeah, that sounds right. That sounds right. But I would say that we have some room to go there a little bit because people have this fuzzy feeling of, well, if I'm unsafe, clearly my business is more risky. It's worth less. If I'm more safe, my business is safer. It's worth more. And I think that business owners have that understanding. But whereas 20 years ago, they couldn't really put their finger on how technology was adding value, I think the average business owner does not yet have the ability to be able to make that dotted line connection. But they know that they should, right? They know that they should. And we're at a really great dawning moment right now where if you're a service provider, right, your clients are actually a little bit ahead of you because they're just starting to ask these questions of themselves and it's burning a hole in their brain before they ask you, right? And if you're providing them the roadmap for, hey, this is how this is going to create business value, we're going to reduce risk this way, you're going to be satisfying compliance that way, right? This is going to be really good for you to acquire new customers. This is going to be really good next time you think about selling your business, right? I think that people will see that they'll see that direct connection there.
Yeah. So making that connection for everyone watching could be kind of an inflection point, if you will, in your cybersecurity marketing and messaging. It sounds like because you're shifting their perception effectively over to that business value side of things. That's what we
So
need.
yeah, I guess I'm validating your 86%. That sounds right to me, and I think it might even be higher than that. But what I would say is there's an opportunity right now, currently, to capitalize on that, because I don't think technology providers in general have figured out how to capture that that value appreciation in cyber.
Yeah, that's true. So just time wise, I want to keep moving. I'm sure we could talk about this for hours on end. Let's get into more tactical elements, just kind of talking about content. How can targeted content overcome these objections?
Well, we support our partners in targeting based on cybersecurity requirements. So a lot of providers are specialized. Hey, we only work in healthcare. We only work in financial services. We only work with manufacturers, right? And I think that each one of these industries has a cyber message, right? There's a cyber message that those clients will respond to that's specific to them, specific to their business, and it's not about the technology, right?
Yeah.
It's about how the needs of that specific type of business, right? Really can, there's a cyber angle on that, right? And you as the provider can support them in being competitive in their vertical, right? Versus their peers. So
yeah. No, it's kind of I mean, from at least I would say our perspective is a no-brainer in a way of personalizing the content and targeting it to verticals, especially if you have the ability to do so, the resources to do so, to say, hey, we work with healthcare and nonprofits and finance and everything, and to really hone the messaging around that. I just want to quickly tie this into the next question, just because I think it's, tied up with a nice bow, if you will, is using client testimonials, case studies. That's all aligned under that vertical. If you have the ability to do so, I think that's a huge social proof, as we talked about earlier, side of things, to be able to showcase, what you're doing from a service perspective, what has happened. Again, this company is here. This is what they're doing. This is how we help them get there. Now you, Mr. or Mrs. Prospect, we can work with you to do the same.
Yeah, I mean, I think credibility in general, right? And you were talking about a specific credibility point there. You talked about a few of them. Credibility in general is super important in cyber because people don't know who to trust. It is not super clear who is the arbiter of cyber to most small businesses. And I know pretty much every MSP watching this says, well, my clients know that I'm in charge of cyber. But I would argue they also think their lawyers are in charge of cyber. They sometimes call their accountants. They sometimes call their insurers, right? I think that there's in my mind, there's two types of credibility points you need to hit with every single one of your clients if you want to win a sale. You need that external credibility point that says that, hey, the offering that we're presenting to you, we didn't make it up. This is based on industry standards. This is based on best practices. Other people in the industry are winning with this, right? But then you need to provide that internal credibility point. And the easiest way to do that is with client testimonials or case studies, as you said.
Yeah.
You need to tell the client that, hey, not only does this strategy work in the world, and this is the strategy you should be using, but I'm actually a credible provider of this strategy, right? And client testimonials are great for that.
Yeah. Absolutely agreed. I heard somebody who said a little quote recently at an event I went to, that facts tell, stories sell. And I loved that because that's so true, right? Yes, I can throw all the stats at you and facts about, well, this is what you need, and these are the framework you need and everything like that. But stories, and this aligns to hero's journey and so many different things that you talked about, our wonderful lizard brains and needing those stories overall. Stories sell. That's what we need. We need that emotional connection. I want that. And this is something that we try to, work with our clients on and preach about, is not just that, again, technical side and those facts, but we need those stories to get people down the path that they need to go.
Yeah. I mean, I think when you're using facts and figures, right, people think, oh, that's out there. and they believe them or they don't, right? But for
Yeah.
them to bring that and think about, oh, that's here, right? They need to think
Mhm.
about the people they know, and you're the provider, right? You need to provide them a story they can imagine themselves in.
Exactly. Exactly. Yep. One other thing, and we've kind of again touched on the negative positive here, but how much do you think MSPs should use compliance as kind of a messaging cornerstone? And this has just come up with our own, work with MSPs of like, well, people need, NIST or they need HIPAA or they need whatever it may be. They have to be compliant with that. And that's really what we're going to message out there, / the fear of regulatory penalties. I feel like my 2 cents, there's so much more to this that needs to be done. Yes, that can be one piece of the pie, if you will, but again, if we're going back to that, the ROI messaging and customer trust and business continuity, and there's kind of a lot of different pieces that need to be messaged all together to align with pain points to provide solutions. Do you feel the same?
Well, I think compliance work cuts both ways
Mm,
there. I think it's a tool. It's actually a language, really. Compliance is a language. It's a way of describing the things that are good to do, um, and and to borrow credibility for those things that are good to do. Yes, if you fail to do some of those things that are good to do, you can be subject to regulatory sanction. You could be if the excrement hits the fan, right, and that's what you really need to worry about. People look at your practices and they see the list of good things to do, and they look at like, well, you weren't doing these good things like you're supposed to be doing. That's what really matters, right? That's what you
mhm.
should really be afraid of. I don't know that regulatory sanction. I mean, I would like to say, yeah, the regulators are doing a great job, but the reality is, I'm not sure that the regulators are, the primary driver here. I think it's cyber insurers, and I think it's people wanting to do the right thing, right, and
Yep.
surviving bad situations. And so I think that language about compliance, um, I think that when you pick up a compliance standard, right, they're all specific to a situation, right? Hey, this is for this is like what car dealers need to do, right? GLBA, right? They need to
Mhm.
be concerned with that. This is if you're selling a consumer product, what you need to be worried about, FTC safeguards, right? Um, there are there's guidebooks that exist so that people don't have to invent what those good practices are, so they even can navigate what's a complex world. And I think that that's what that language of compliance is used for. And just like when you're talking to your attorney or your accountant or your doctor, right? They're going to tell you what the best practices are, right? They're going to say like, look, here's the stuff you absolutely have to do, because if you don't do this, you're just not going to be in business. Here's the stuff that, like, in a tight situation, you should probably do. Here's the stuff that might be good, but Joe across the street's not doing that either,
Mhm.
right? And that language that they speak in, right, is about compliance with standards, compliance with best practices. And I think that I think of compliance as a lingua franca for security, right? It's not, I don't see this as like a black and white thing.
Gotcha. Okay. Interesting. Um, Content, just to stay on that vein, thoughts on kind of content formats that are best used for addressing these different pain points, or again trying to provide solutions and shift those objections over to buy-in points.
Yeah, I mean, this may not be a popular thing that I have to say, but I'm sure you've said something along the same lines to your client, which is you need all the content.
Right.
There, there are different situations that your clients find themselves in throughout the journey. They're in different places, and you need the right content to find them in those places at the right place in their journey. And there's awareness phase when someone doesn't even know who you are. There's someone's researching a very specific issue and they actually need it written down in article form, right?
Mhm.
They're already your customer, right? And they just need a little bit of help of like, where do I find the resources? Which by the way, guys, you need to be marketing to your existing customers too, right? That is super important. And then there's, I love video content like what we're doing right now.
Mhm.
And this is like selfishly from the perspective of it's easy. It's easy. And you put it on your calendar, you show up, you create the content, people like watching it, right? They become
Yep.
informed, and you do it again next week, right? And
Right.
I think that writing articles, putting together infographics, stuff like that, it works really well. and it's time intensive, and you need to do it. And I think that a mix of content is really what everyone needs.
Yeah, 100% to answer exactly the same thing. And I, unfortunately, there's this disparity between what usually MSPs or MSSPs are doing, of the kind of throw it against the wall and see what sticks method of like, oh, we'll try a couple posts here and we'll do this over here. It, like, just to go back to the data side of things, Google has their 7-11-4 rule, which, if you haven't heard of that, that's basically 11 touch points at 4 or more channels. And then I've now heard it's up to 13, and somebody the other day told me 27, and it's just getting ridiculous. The whole point of it is, though, that people need that. People need multiple channels. They need you to meet them where they're at. And you have to be in all those different places, showcasing different mediums of content, video, blogs, infographics, whatever it is. Unfortunately, it's the way of the world now if you want to win.
Yeah, and I want to add one more note here, which is that this is something I've noticed. I think it's a truism, and Mark, you could probably be the expert and tell me if I'm right or wrong. You need to have a comprehensive strategy. I mean, you can't, if you're doing half of the marketing, it might be working great and it will lead to 0 sales if you're only handling part of the buyer journey excellent, and then everyone's falling off a cliff. So it's not to say that you need every type of content on day one, but you do need a complete journey. And when you start improving that journey with deeper content, right, you need to deepen it sort of across the journey, right? Otherwise, you're going to end up with, I mean, you could have hundreds of really excellent leads that turn into no sales, right? If you don't have a full journey taken care of.
Yep. 100% agreed. Yeah. And this we could definitely talk hours about, I will say that. So, this is something that I was thinking about, and we can kind of dive into it as needed, but metrics. What metrics matter when showcasing the value to drive conversions? And this is where, I'm thinking kind of ROI, operational efficiency, reduced downtime, different elements like this. This is going away from the stories a little bit, although you can form stories around this. But I want to, hit these C-suite people kind of where they need on the number side of things. What metrics are you thinking?
So there's some camps in cybersecurity, which you may not be aware of. There are people that believe everything should be quantified into dollars, because as a business owner, it's the easiest thing to understand, right? Oh, that's a dollar. That's a real thing. We've taken this thing that's theoretical and we've turned it into a dollar amount that I can now weigh on a scale, right? And that is true. And I think for businesses that are making rational strategic decisions, you need more of that. But I think most of my partners are working with a mixture of small and medium-sized businesses, and most of them tend to be tactical. And so when it comes to metrics, I think that metrics play a role in understanding if you're performing effectively. So if you go in and measure your customers' cybersecurity so that you can tell them how they're currently performing and what improvements they make, you should base those recommendations on metrics. And you should assure your customer that you're measuring, but I'm not sure that they need to see them. What they do need to see sometimes, though, is relative numbers, because there's hundreds of things that have to go right to keep attackers out. Okay. And unfortunately, no one wants to read a narrative of hundreds of things. And so sometimes just saying, hey, you've got 30 practices in place, but there's 70 you don't have in place that you should have in place. Sometimes that type of metric is really important. When you meet with a client 4 times a year on cybersecurity, if you're doing QBRs that are actually quarterly, hopefully you're talking about security for at least a few minutes in there. It's really important to say, we had 4 incidents. We were scoring a 30 last quarter, and now we're scoring a 42, right? Those are really important things so that people can take something super abstract that they haven't studied for 20 years like you and try to relate to it, right? But I think that that's the best place for metrics in cyber sales or even just customer interaction.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Yeah, and I was thinking about before this kind of just that the ROI calculation of just kind of overcoming the objections. Just thinking of how could you do that? How could you, and I was like, okay, could you use a calculator, for example, as part of like
You
maybe it's a
you
lead magnet?
absolutely can. You
Yeah.
absolutely can. And for you're talking about assessment practices that
Mhm.
cost tens of thousands of dollars to go do that calculation, but you are talking about many thousands of ways attackers can break in, times in some case many times thousands of assets theoretically per month based on dollar value that you're like making up of these assets.
Mhm.
And the math is very complicated, and it's difficult to get right. So I think that it's really easy to get someone to run one of these calculations, and the numbers they give back to you are not particularly useful. And
Mhm.
I think that a lot of business owners do respond to, hey, you're only doing some of these practices. You should be doing all of them, right?
Yep.
And I think that level of qualification is actually just as useful, if not more useful, than something based on dollars. Because the problem with dollars, right? The problem with dollars is you could tell them you've got $1 million of cybersecurity risk, and they'll be scratching their head and saying, "Well, I've been in business 20 years, and like nothing bad's happened, right?"
Mhm.
And it's hard to overcome that in someone's head, right? When you hand them a number.
Yep. Would it be good to kind of equate it to something that they understand more? And this is one of the messaging, strategies that I've seen is, for the cost of one employee's salary in your business, you can secure your
Oh
business.
yes,
Just,
absolutely.
oh,
And
okay, now I got it.
for the on the cost side and on the threat side, right? What would actually be the loss scenario? I would put the question to the customer. Well, how much would it cost for you to be
Mm,
down for 7 days? Yeah, you lost all of those orders. You're not actually
right.
going to be able to make them up. Well, how much would that cost you?
Yeah,
Right? Ask them. I don't think you need to give them a number. I think you can ask them
that's
they know
fair.
what the number is.
Yep. They're guiding themselves down that path. I like that. You're guiding them in a way, but they're leading themselves. Um, let's see. Couple last things just wanted to touch on. This is definitely a segue from what we just talked about, but how can you communicate the long-term benefits regarding upfront costs to finalize buy-in? Kind of
Well,
thinking longer term.
yeah, you brought one up earlier around value, right?
Mhm.
Business value. But let's get a little more specific. Let's talk about business valuation, right? Um, the reality is that a informed buyer, and let me tell you, most people who buy businesses, right, they're trying to be informed about their purchases,
Mhm.
right? And if they're not informed, they ask for help, right? And let me tell you, those accountants that come in and help, they definitely put a number on the cyber risk, and
Yep.
they definitely discount the assets, right? And the business on that basis. So that's a huge one. That's a long term one, right? But the other thing is just competitiveness. I think like the reality is when you go out and buy stuff these days, anything, right? You're always asking yourself, can I trust this company, right? And unfortunately, in this digitized world, when you say trust, you're talking about digital trust. You're talking about cyber, right?
Mhm.
And even if people don't put that word on it, that is what they're thinking, right? And that people want to know that it's safe to do business with you, and um, that future, whether you think of it as an opportunity cost for missed business, right, or future value, right, of customer accretion, direct dotted line to how safe they're going to feel doing business with you, and that's all about your cyber strategy.
Gotcha. That's good. Good point. In the interest of time, I want to make sure we give some time, back to people for the top of the hour here. That's coming. As I was again putting this together and thinking about what we do with our clients related to cybersecurity messaging and how do you actually execute on that. I think a good takeaway for people watching today would be to kind of create a chart of sorts, looking at, okay, here are the main messaging points that I want to get across, and these are the content types, if you will, the marketing types that I want to use. This is after, to me, channels I've got my channel mix. This is good. I'm set up well here. But I was thinking, okay, we want to talk about risk of breach is like a messaging topic, and we could do case studies and, statistics or scenarios, and then, ROI of cybersecurity. Okay, a financial breakdown, a calculator, as we talked about, customer trust, testimonials, competitive advantage, differentiation highlights, competitor analysis. How can I take these messages and actually execute on them, and then tie that up to the different channels? Just for me, from a strategic standpoint of how am I going to lay this out? That's something that I would, if I was an MSP watching this, I would sit down and kind of map that out, if you will, and say, okay, here's what we want to get across. These are the 5-10 things that we want to message. And this is both the channel as well as how we're going to execute on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we just look at the marketing funnel, I think at the top half of your funnel, it's really important to be specific about the version of cyber and how that relates to a customer's ICP, right? I just wrote some copy this morning, and I wrote a version for healthcare. I wrote a version for financial services. I wrote a version for international businesses, right? You need that cyber message that's specific to that. And there's compliance standards that are good for each of these situations, right? If you're in SLED, state, local, and education business, NIST CSF is like the big thing. And that's like a headline, right? That's a headline because the state regulators are like pouring that all over every part of the government, and the local level, like you have to do NIST CSF. And so that is up in top of funnel, right? Down at the second half of the funnel, like that lower funnel where people are maybe transitioning over to understanding, well, what are you actually selling, right? You definitely need to make that connection between like NIST CSF and SLED and, okay, here's actually a specific offering, right? It includes X, it includes Y, it includes Z. And that's super important. And then I think, post, for people who are not your current customer, for people who are already your current customer, your existing customers, it is important to do that same exact thing, both stages there, but you need to tell them where they are now and where they should be, right? So there needs to be a point A and a point B, so they feel like they're in this journey with motion. And so from the perspective of channels, how are you doing awareness? How are you communicating your specific offering in that early sales process? And for your existing customers, how are you keeping in touch with them? And I hope everyone here is marketing to their existing customers and telling them what they're doing. But I think the existing customer sale is the best customer sale, in my opinion. But I love those deep connections with customers. But
no, absolutely. That drives so many aspects of the relationship that you have with them, retention, et cetera. But then, upsells and just long-term working with them. Matt, I appreciate your time so much. I appreciate all the insights that you've given today. I know everyone else does watching, and I hope that, everyone watching has taken a lot from this and has kind of some directions they want to go now to build out their cybersecurity messaging, especially to overcome those objections. Any last thoughts or anything you want to pitch about FortMesa, for example?
Oh, do more cyber, guys. And by the way, a lot of this stuff is hard, right? So people like Mark and I are actually here to help you in your journey. Crafting these messages, you do not have to crack an encyclopedia of cyber and study your way there. We can support you in this, and that's what FortMesa does. That's what Mark does. So I would say that's the big takeaway. And by the way, we have a free edition of our software platform that's for internal use if anyone's interested in upping their own cyber game internally.
Very nice. Very nice. Well, thank you, everyone. I know we're 15 minutes over, but that's okay. It was good stuff.
All right.
Appreciate it. Thank you, everyone.